No, 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 no. Thank you, scientists, for making amazing music.
Moving along, singing a song I don't even know the words to.
Stranger Heads Prevail by Thank You Scientists. So Thank You Scientists is a 7-member group from New Jersey. They're kind of labeled as that crossover progressive rock band, being more of a jazz fusion style of that kind of heavy rock. Their sound is very similar to, say, a Cambrian and Coheed or a Deer Hunter, or that style of sound where it's kind of that post-grunge, blending different styles within that rock core to more of a jazzy, almost like a big band style at times. They're really utilizing, say, the saxophones and the horns and the trumpets and the violins with those 7 members. Now, when you're dealing with so many musicians, 7 musicians is quite a lot, you always run the risk of having some of those backup musicians, such as Russ Lynch on the violin and viola, or Ellis Genovich on the saxophone, and Andrew Digeris on, say, the trumpet. These different instruments could be more of like a gimmick at times and not necessarily a rooted facet of the band. So I was a little bit concerned with these guys, where they're just following along with the guitars or just following along with the harmonies or the rhythms or that kind of thing, instead of really being their own identity. Now, luckily, this isn't always the case with Thank You Scientists, but every once in a while it does kind of become apparent with a lot of the songs using these other instruments, but not really to the full potential. So getting into the actual music, I will have to admit, it did take a number of listens to actually get into the music here and really appreciate what's here. Because I gotta say, the music that is on here is actually really, really great, and it's a great time all around. For me, it took me quite a while to get into it just because I'm not familiar with this style of music. I will have to say that my 2 favorite songs are actually the opening and the closing tracks of the prologue and epilogue. These 2 tracks are just a lot of fun, and they don't really take themselves too seriously. And luckily, I don't think this band actually takes themselves too seriously overall as well, which is definitely an A+. I can see these guys kind of be those snobbish or even pretentious, and luckily that's never the case. They always deal a little bit in the lightheartedness, and this style of music really makes itself apparent on that second song, A Somnambulist, and I probably butchered the pronunciation of that one. But, you know, it really hits you with the horns, and it really hits you with that brass section, and it's quite relentless at times as well when it introduces you to the main chorus.
It's hard to sleep when keeping one eye open, and it's hard to breathe when
They use this style quite well, I will admit. I do like a lot of the jam sessions that these guys have. I also like the fact that nobody here outshines one another, and which is a really hard thing to do with 7 members, like I said before. Even though I feel like the guitars are taking center stage a lot of the time, he does leave a lot of room for the violinist, the trumpetist, and the saxophonist. So incorporating these within the songs adds a little bit more dimensions to the songs. And some of these songs are definitely better than others. The Caverns doesn't really quite resonate very well with me. I feel like there's a lot more of just the noodling around the landscape as opposed to really kind of hunkering down, and I think that's mainly just the style of music that we have here. But then you have other songs like Mr. Invisible that has more of like a poppy aspect, so there's a little bit more to grab onto. It's got a very easy beat and it's got a very easy rhythm section in this song, and overlaid on all of this is Saul's vocal styles, which actually are very, very good. A lot of times with this style of music, I'm not really a big fan of that type of singing, but here it sounds very crisp and it sounds very clear, and it's a lot easier to get into it.
silent roars will kill this curiosity. Devastation feels natural.
Then you have a song such as A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, which, okay, I will admit, I do like that wordplay of, you know, cheap's clothing and sheep's clothing. That was really, really fun. But the song itself, much like Caverns, it really doesn't do too much for me. Now, luckily, we do have the next song of The Blue Automatic, and I do really appreciate this song. This song has a lot of really good flows and a lot of good rhythms, where you have those transitions between those really jazzy kind of jam sessions, but then goes back into the choruses and verses. So they handle those quite well, which is a pretty hard feat to do, but I feel like they handle them pretty well. And a really, really great example of this one is Need More Input. This is probably my favorite, like, structured song on this album, outside of, again, the bookendings, opening and closing track. This song in particular really showcases their ability to create such a really great hook in a song. When they play that chorus, when you finally get introduced to it the first time around, I was sucked in and I was like, okay, this is fantastic, let's keep going on with this. And so when we get into that jazz section, and here's where they really solidified the use of all those different instruments. Andrew on the trumpet finally is able to kind of break away from just adding a little bit of flair here and there and really take center stage, and I really wish they utilized this guy's talent more in the album, because near the end of that jam session, he's almost got that Flight of the Bumblebee, or just this really crazy jazz trumpet that just really pierces and leads you right into that reprise of the chorus near the end. And that transition from that really crazy trumpet playing to that final chorus, that is what really made me kind of replay the song over and over again when it came on my iPod. And unfortunately, they kind of follow it up with Rube Goldberg variations. And I know this is more of like a straight up jazz piece as opposed to a rock piece. So I can kind of give it a pass in that fact because it is more of a jazz kind of a thing, but don't quite connect with it quite as much. But then finally we're into Psychopomp, and at the end of the day, I enjoy this song, and I like that kind of Tool aspect of this song as well, where they're saying, you know, our bodies are just vessels. There are a couple of points actually in this album where it feels very much like a Tool aspect if Tool was a little bit more jazzy and lighthearted. So you can definitely feel the influences there. I don't know if this song really needed to be as long as it is, but I do appreciate how long it is for that journey that you are brought on, so I will give it that. And unfortunately, I feel like the album should have stopped here. I feel like if they had stopped there and then given us epilogue, it would have been a really great listen, but unfortunately they do follow it up with the Amateur Arsonist's Handbook. Again, this is much like the Caverns, much like the Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, and much like that Rube Goldberg variations, where it just didn't quite hit me as well as I was hoping that it would. But that's really about it. That is the album. Overall, I had a fantastic time diving into this. This is a kind of music that I normally wouldn't have sought out, but a lot of people have been recommending it to me, so I finally picked it up and I have been very grateful for it. I would have to say my own personal rating of this album is probably more of a stream it if you can find it. That's really where this album lies for me, but I would probably give it a much higher rating just for the musicianship alone. And so that's where my kind of rating scheme falls, where it's definitely a streamable album. And I'm actually very excited to see where Thank You Scientists go from here, especially as I could see it being a vast improvement of their first album as well. So that's about it. What did you guys think of the Stranger Heads Prevail? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, let me know by commenting below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know that this is more of an album that you guys would probably dig more than I did, so let me know what you guys thought. And until next time, notes out.